you bleed green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. Ready? This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go!
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50-plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go!
EAGLES, Eagles.
Morning Birds fans, a Tuesday morning get together on the Mac and Mac Birds 365 show here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We got 2 hours of Eagle Sports Talk coming your way and two good guests. We'll give you the details on those guys joining us coming up in just a couple of minutes. Johnny Mac, know you had to head over to South Philly yesterday to hear from the newest Eagle quarterback, Kenny Pickett. Seems like he's happy to be here. Did a nice job. I thought he answered all the questions you guys fired at him, and those that he couldn't answer or chose not to answer, he deftly avoided and did a good job at that. Seems like a smart young man. Seems like a guy who wants to be here. Doesn't seem like a guy who's going to come in and rock the boat, which is one of the things that has kind of bothered me the last couple of days. Last night I was on WIP about the whole Kenny Pickett, Justin Fields thing, that the Eagles made a good trade because it will bother Jalen less. Really? Are we going back down to Carson Wentz?
I don't think either are going to bother Jalen a minute. They could have gotten Justin Fields. I don't think either. He's not that guy. Yeah, I mean, the assumption that he's got the same personality as Carson Wentz is lunacy, number one. You've seen enough of the guy. And both quarterbacks, you can have your flavors. We argued it yesterday. I prefer Pickett. You prefer Fields. Both haven't been successful. I mean, why would he be looking in his rearview mirror at these two? I mean, come on. It's the NFL. Yeah, no way. I mean, either or both. You could have, how about a second string, both of them, second and third string? He wouldn't care. Yeah, I don't get those people.
The only team doing that is the Cleveland Browns, who are up to 4 quarterbacks now yesterday with the signing of Tyler Huntley. I don't really understand why you need 4 quarterbacks. 2 should be enough. Eagles got their development quarterback, so they're perfectly fine at 3. But I got to admit, I was impressed by the young man. I thought he handled himself well. It doesn't amount to a whole hell of a lot. It's what you do on the field that matters. And the fact that he gave a good press conference in his introduction, or reintroduction, I should say, to Philadelphia. He played up on that pretty good. Now his mother and father only have to drive an hour and a half to watch him play. The only problem is he's not going to play. If they want to drive an hour and a half to watch him carry a clipboard, they can do that here in Philadelphia this year. But I like what the young man had to say. I think he handled himself well. And that's what you need out of your backup quarterback. He has to be a team guy. He talked about, quote unquote, the room, and he's looking forward to getting in the room. And he's already met McKee and Jalen and the like. So if you're talking about a backup guy, he's a backup guy, and you shouldn't get all that motivated by him one way or the other. But when you're talking about quarterback, I think there is an added importance there, John, as to how he fills his role on the team.
No, I agree. I mean, the Eagles have shown it. They care about backup quarterback a little bit more than most teams. Probably most teams should take the Eagles tact.
Agreed.
And you know, they've needed it in the past, and it's worked for them in the past. You know, I think that's kind of, that outlier's kind of overemphasized also, because it's not like it's going to happen all the time. That was a rare run by Nick Foles, and you can't lean on that, but you do want to spend some time on the position and you want to put some serious, because there's nothing worse when you lose your starting quarterback and your season is over. Now, a lot of people use the hyperbole of, oh, your season's over. And I do it myself. So I'm not criticizing that. But
And oftentimes I'd suggest you're probably right.
yeah, well,
If
sometimes
you
you
want
are
to say you
right.
shouldn't do it, but just because it's not the right thing to do. Well, if you want to, it's a projection, it's a prediction, it's an
Yeah.
opinion, and sometimes your opinion's right. Sometimes you got to eat crow afterwards. But I got no problem with anybody who says, "Up, season's over."
Yeah, and sometimes it's the case. You look at Kirk Cousins last season. Sometimes it's not the case. You look at Deshaun Watson. Eventually, Cleveland was able to catch sort of a lightning bolt with Joe Flacco, and at least get to the playoffs and have some success and really some pretty impressive games with a veteran backup quarterback. And in the case Cousins goes down, boy, I think they use three different quarterbacks. They're going back and forth, different skill sets, different styles, just a disaster. So I think the Eagles always have a plan in place to at least have competency at the backup quarterback position. I do think, as I said yesterday, I think Kenny Pickett can bring that to them. As far as his presence, yeah, I mean, the guy's been a long time starting quarterback. He's used to it. Even if you go back to college at Pitt,
Right, played 5 years.
you know, those guys talk all the time at the college level, and they're used to it. And then he goes to the Steelers, and he's a starter there, for most of the time over the past 2 years. So he's used to it. It's no surprise he's good at it, at least somewhat. So, yeah, I think it's I said yesterday, as far as when I grade, so to speak, some of these moves individually, some I like, as we know, some I dislike. This one I like. I think it makes a lot of sense. You got a cost-effective backup, just as Jalen Hurts. Even though they structured the Jalen Hurts contract very well, still you're paying more than you were. And this is about when it kicks in. So you have the cost-effective nature of the backup, and we see what backup quarterbacks are costing now. Pretty expensive. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I think he can bring competency, win a game or two. I think he's better than Gardner Minshew. I thought Gardner Minshew was a good backup quarterback at the time. Now, since Gardner has played and been successful for Indianapolis, we'll see what he does in Las Vegas. I think it's in the same vein there. And I like it. I like the move. I hope play though.
Right. I'm okay. Right. The whole thing everyone's rooting for is we can all have opinions on what he could do, what he should do, what the Eagles could have done. It could have been different. Bottom line is you hope he never sees the field.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Please do a great job of wearing that ball cap and carrying that clipboard, Kenny, because we'd rather have Jalen Hurts stay healthy and play all 17 games, which is the funny part of it. But again, to the Eagles' credit, they put a value on the backup quarterback position. And I think it's a smart way to handle their business. There are some teams that don't do as much and have probably paid the price over the years. So I'll give Howie Roseman credit for that. I just think I think it's a solid B move. I think they could have made an A move, but you still don't turn your nose up at a B move at this. All right. And one other thing I want to get to with you before Marcus Hayes is going to be our first guest, and we'll punch up Marcus in less than 10 minutes. Report came out last night. Shoot, while I was on the air. You don't usually get NFL nuggets at 10:30, quarter to 11 at night. But Jeremy Fowler reported last night that the Eagles and Hassan Reddick had agreed to push a bonus that he was due on March 15th. So they'd already done it. It just got reported last night, a couple days late, that was due on March 15th, $1 million bonus, back to April 1st. And the belief is they did so because the Eagles are getting traction, getting closer to a potential trade for Hassan Reddick. And that's why Hassan signed off on, if we need to hold up the bonus so as to get the trade to go through, So be it, he'll wait an extra 16 days. Hassan's made a bunch of money playing in national football. Don't think the 15 days is going to kill him.
He can wait a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to kill him one way or the other. But I think it's a fair assumption to read into that yeah, they're making progress on a trade for Hassan Reddick. I still, depending on what they get in exchange for him, I don't think it's going to be a whole hell of a lot. It looks like Hassan Reddick we're getting that much closer to him being out the door, John. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's short term. I think it's a bad thing. Long term, we'll see. I think a lot depends on Bryce Hupp, who's a certain degree unproven. Certainly, he's a 3-down player. And Nolan Smith. Don't forget Nolan Smith, because he's a big part of this as well, who obviously is still dramatically unproven, to say the least. So I think short term, yeah, you're certainly taking a hit, but you got to juggle, and it's hard. And just projecting, even if you want to go the low end on a potentially renegotiated deal with Hassan Reddick, you're talking 19-20 million, I would think, at the floor of it. Can you pay 3 edge rushers? It's pay and play, really. Can you pay 3 over $10 million? So let's say 19, 17, 10 with Reddick, Hupp, Sweat. Maybe you can do that in the elevated salary cap world, the big spike. Maybe it's the most valued position outside quarterback, arguably. Maybe you can do it. But you also, I mean, I believe Howie Roseman, when he was talking at the combine, he seems to really want to get Nolan Smith involved. And we know GMs with first-round picks, they don't want first-round picks to fail. They never do. Right. Howie's not alone in that category. They never want those guys to fail. So, I mean, the play part of it as well. How many, and you still have Brandon Graham, old reliable, old faithful, who's still going to be here for a 15th year. Now, injuries are a part of it, but you only got 53 roster spots. You got to juggle it the right way. I still think it's more likely Hassan gets traded, but the 2 weeks you can't throw out the equation that maybe it's renegotiation as well. What comes first? Maybe he agrees to take 17 million. And at that price point, the Eagles go, you know what? This is too good of a deal. Who knows? I doubt it, because Huff's making 17 million, but you get the point. You got to leave the door open. And the same thing happened with Slay. Slay took less money, essentially, got an extra year, got guaranteed money, but took less money on paper. And all of a sudden he was back and people thought he was out the door. Hell, he said goodbye. He and his wife said goodbye to Philadelphia, and then he was back. So you never say never, but it certainly looks like the Eagles are about to move on from Hassan Reddick.
The only thing that came off the table for me last night, and I'll get your take on this, and we'll run this by Marcus when we punch him up. The Eagles now can't cut Hassan Reddick without paying him that $1 million. You can't ask the guy to show a little bit more patience and then turn around and take advantage and go on March 29th. Yeah, we couldn't get the deal done. Hassan, you're not accepting our lesser proposal than you think you're worth. Here are your walking papers. Thank you very much for your time spent with the Eagles. Can't do that. That's just bad faith. There's good faith and bad faith. That would be bad faith if they ask them to push back the bonus and then go, yeah, we're going to cut you before the bonus actually takes place.
Yeah, I never put that too much on the table personally. I never thought Howie was going to cut him. So I didn't think about that too much. But yeah, certainly if you're going to pay that money, you're certainly not going to cut him. And if you're not going to pay that money and you kicked it back 2 weeks, you do look like a dick.
Yeah, and that would go to Jeff Lurie too.
Yes,
that's something Howie just can't do with the swirl of a pen. He'd need to run that by his owner first, and that would make the owner look really bad too. If the Eagles,
and
I'm not suggesting I think they're going to do this or keep an eye out for it. It's probably very, 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 very unlikely. I hope it is sure as hell unlikely because you
No,
can't.
I think Jeffrey Lurie takes pride in his team-friendly reputation, player-friendly reputation that his organization has. So, yeah, I agree with you. There's no way they're cutting him. No way.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. All right, he's McMullen. I'm McDonald. That makes it Mac and Mac Birds 365. We got one of our favorites, one of the best in town. He covers the Eagles, but he covers absolutely everything. One of the lead columnists for the Philadelphia Inquirer. We got him on today to talk about the Birds with us. Marcus Hayes, Inquirer, WIP, joined us next here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Mac and Mac here with you on Birds 365. The week after free agency hit. It's still ongoing, and Eagles still need to do some things, but they've done plenty already. Here to give us the insight on what he thinks he's done is our buddy Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer and WIP. Marcus, we were talking about the Son Reddick news that broke last night. Give Jeremy Fowler from ESPN credit. They pushed back a bonus to the end of the month so as to probably try and continue to facilitate a trade. Hassan Reddick was Hassan Reddick. If we assume Hassan Reddick will be an ex-Eagle before April 1st, was he out the door when he came to an agreement with the Eagles that he was going to try and find a trade partner? Was he out the door the day they signed Bryce Huff, or was he out the door last week when Josh Sweat decided to redo his contract and settle for 1 year? When should we have seen the writing on the wall?
Well, I'm not sure he's out the door. I mean,
you're still a believer, huh? Good for you.
Well, I mean, if he's willing to rework his deal, I mean, the issue isn't, can he get traded? There are 31 teams who would trade for him. Is he willing to be traded and agree to a restructured or a new contract with a new team? And what's the compensation versus the outlay? Hassan Reddick is not as valuable an overall player as, say, Brandon Graham in his prime. He gets more sacks, but he doesn't set the edge. He doesn't stop the run. Brandon Graham was an elite defensive end for a long time. So I don't know that the market is as robust as Hassan Reddick and his agents thought so. That said, you're going to have a hard time finding a better situation than you have in Philadelphia for the next 2 years, especially considering they stockpile defensive ends. So as much as he's played last year, he probably won't play as much going forward with Bryce Huff in the fold. So yeah, I don't believe the Eagles want to get rid of him. I don't believe they think that he's worth the cap hit that he would incur this year. But if I'm not mistaken, they're in the same situation with Darius Slay last year.
Yeah.
Hassan Reddick's got a lot more rubber on his tires than Darius had at that point. They like Hassan Reddick. They think he's a good player. They wish he was better at certain things. So, but if we do take your assumption into hand, I guess he was out the door at the end of the season. Hassan Reddick held a very long, very involved post-game press conference in Tampa. It was essentially, either they're going to extend me or I'm gone press conference. And anybody who was there for it understood. He was literally the last guy out of the locker room.
Yeah, last one.
Right. So, and I asked him on the way to the food line, I said, the buffet, the buffet they get before they go on the plane. I asked him, I said, are you going to hold out? He's like, no, I'm not going to hold out. I'm not going to do that. Then he said, well, I don't want to think about that stuff right now. And I was like, we talked some more and I might write about it. But this was always in his mind, and I'm not sold that. I don't think he would mind leaving, but I think they would be disappointed if they didn't retain him.
Yeah, it's complicated because now Hupp is here, and you mentioned Darius Slay. I compared the two situations a little bit, Marcus. Now, last year the Eagles kind of decided, well, we can keep two of the three defensive backs. At the time, it was Slay, it was Bradbury, it was C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and then they toggled back and forth. At first, they wanted to keep Slay and C.J., then they couldn't work things out with C.J., and it turned into Bradbury all of a sudden agreed to a more cost-effective deal than they thought he would, and all of a sudden it became Bradbury and C.J., and then all of a sudden Slay agrees to a renegotiation, and it ends up being Slay and Bradbury, and C.J.'s out the door. Luckily, he's back as a playmaker. We'll talk about that. But here now you have Hupp introduced. Now, they didn't have all three at the time, but now they have all three in the offseason. And Hupp's making $17 million. You've already renegotiated with Josh Sweat, who is kind of in the Slay mode. He took a little bit less than I think we all expected, but he's over $10 million, could be up to $13 million. And then you have Hassan, who wants more and should have more, to be honest. If you look at his standing in the rest of the league and where the market is, should be up in the 20 million category. Can you pay, even with the bloated salary cap and the large increase, can you afford to pay three guys 10 million plus? And, oh, by the way, Howie Roseman's out there saying, we got to get Nolan Smith involved. And we still got BG, Old Faithful, Old Reliable. How much is too much? Or is anything too much?
Nothing's too much. This is defensive end heaven. I mean, if you can rush the passer, you can have a slot. They carry 5 defensive ends. They rotate them. Brandon Graham plays defensive tackle, a third of his 15 snaps. So yeah, I mean, there's no reason these guys can't coexist. Yeah, it's a splurge, but they always splurge on the defensive line. They don't splurge anywhere else. You can argue they splurge on the offensive line, but what they tend to do on the offensive line is they lock up guys like Landon Dickerson as early as possible, so their deal is much more digestible down the road. You know, you can argue that the Eagles' elite offensive line has been marginally underpaid for 10 years because they keep giving them guaranteed money earlier and the gambles pay off. You know, I mean, if you look at what Jason Kelsey has earned, you look at what Lane Johnson has earned compared to what they, you know, how they played, they probably, you know, took a 5 to 10% pay cut for that security. That said, they love defensive ends. They like defensive tackles, but they love defensive ends.
If you guys are right that they are going to retain Haason Reddick, basically what it comes down to is Huff in and Barnett out, because they had 5 guys last year at the start of the season, and Derek Barnett was the 5th, or at least he was in my book. So you're putting in Bryce Huff for Derek Barnett. That's pretty damn good upgrade. Expensive one, but Bryce Huff will be much better getting to the quarterback than Derek Barnett. All right. John and I talked about this top of the show in the last couple of days when we knew that the Eagles had traded for their new backup quarterback. I thought Kenny Pickett did a nice job ingratiating himself with the Philadelphia fan base and the media yesterday. Seems like a bright guy and handles his business well. If they have to put him in a game, will he be better than Marcus Mariota this year? Marcus.
I'd say they're about the same. You know, they're very different quarterbacks, but I think you get about the same from them. And, you know, let's be honest. I mean, this offensive line and these weapons, you know, Mac and Mac could alternate series and wind up with 100 passes. I mean, this is an incredibly stacked offense. The only caveat is, you know, how does the offensive line function in the absence of Jason Kelsey? But we have to figure that out at some point. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I would have rather seen Justin Fields, if only because the offensive line and the receivers, but the offensive line in particular, gets used to blocking for Jalen Hurts. It's a hard thing to do, to block for Jalen Hurts, because his habits are not typical quarterback habits. And even breaking the pocket, especially last year, he was very, very unique. I think Justin Fields replicates Jalen Hurts better than Kenny Pickett. And I don't know if that's a huge deal, but for me, it would be, very important. But really, all you have to do is sort of manage the game and hope the defense doesn't give up 40.
And I think Kenny Pickett could be a good game manager, but you said something interesting there about the weapons, and I agree with you with the weapons, and Saquon Barkley's a part of that. But even pre-Saquon Barkley, they had significant weapons with DeAndre Swift. And if Mac and Mac can line up with this group and produce, why the heck are they paying a running back over $13 million, Marcus? Why the sea change?
Well, I think they coveted him. I think they've always liked Saquon Barkley. And for all of their professed originality, quarterback factory, gold standard, the Eagles copy. They're a copycat team. Yeah. At first they copied Dallas, then they copied New England, and now they're copying San Francisco and Christian McCaffrey / Deebo Samuel. People forget Deebo Samuel is a sort of a four-pronged weapon himself.
Yeah.
So I think they see that in Saquon Barkley more than anybody else that they've been able to get their mitts on since LaShawn McCoy. I mean, if you remember, LaShawn McCoy was one of the closest things to Marshall Faulk that we've seen, where not only could he line up as a receiver, but he could come out of the backfield, catch the ball, and was a touchdown threat. I will contend with Orlando Pace and Isaac Bruce and I think Torrey Holt and Kurt Warner on that team, by far the best player on the greatest show on turf, the guy that made
I agree with you.
Was Marshall Faulk.
Yeah.
Right. So if they can get a Marshall Faulk type entity, it opens up everything else. And let's be honest, AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith weren't that open this year. And Jalen had time. And I think they weren't that open is because nobody was scared of DeAndre Swift taking it to the house. He made some nice runs. He's a good running back. But unlike Miles Sanders and unlike LaShawn McCoy, there was no big play threat in DeAndre Swift to that degree. And now with Saquon Barkley, you have that back.
I think you're selling DeAndre a little short, but that's okay.
I mean, where were his breakout plays? I mean, 15 yards versus 50. I mean, that's what we're talking about with Miles and LaShawn. DeAndre, he's a nice back. He's a good player, but he's not that kind of threat. And defenses did not key on him. If you look at the safety play, where the safeties' eyes would go when Miles Sanders and LaShawn McCoy were on the field, it was a different matter. And Miles wasn't as good as LaShawn, but he was a lot better.
Yeah, but he was a home run hitter at times. You know, he had the one season where he had 3 runs over 70 yards. So
yeah,
was it 3 or 4? But that real quick to follow up on that, because I agree with you. I'm 100% with you. The Eagles are trying to copy the 49ers. So, and you brought up Marshall Faulk, who is somebody I talk about all the time as well. Is Saquon Barkley closer? This is my problem. I think it's an evaluation problem. Is Saquon Barkley closer to McCaffrey and Faulk or closer to DeAndre Swift? I would lean towards the latter. I'm sorry. Maybe rookie Saquon Barkley before the ACL, before the 1,500 touches on that crappy turf at MetLife Stadium, half of them, which tears up your body to a ludicrous degree. Is he Christian McCaffrey? Because the Eagles seem to think so, or the closest, as you described it, the closest thing to. I just don't see that player when I see him play.
He's the closest thing that they can get. You know, there are other backs out there that are probably better and more valuable and maybe more dangerous than Saquon Barkley at this point. But again, the Giants' offensive line, there was an era that you guys lived through where the Eagles' offensive line was a story every week and every day if you wanted to. Like, I'm a pretty good sports writer about the offensive line because of Barrett Brooks and, what was the guy's name? Guy McIntyre.
When
they got Guy McIntyre,
great player.
Yeah,
it was
that
great.
Was an upgrade when they got Guy McIntyre.
Yeah.
Okay, until they drafted Trey Thomas and signed John Runyon, this offensive line was a disaster.
Yeah,
and they were unlucky. You know, they had some bad. So my point being, the offensive line with the Giants has gone through a 10-year era, an 8-year era, where it's the story every week. So Saquon Barkley succeeded in spite of that offensive line and in spite of not having a real quarterback. So I don't know, John, you might be right. Maybe there's not a lot of tread left on that tire, but what he's done with what he had to work with in his first 6 years, 4 1,300-yard rushing seasons, he's sniffing 2,000 yards all purpose every year. I would like to see that for a couple of years. I would make that gamble.
Yeah, that's why I was very bullish on the signing. I'm going to attribute a lot of Saquon's not having a repeat of his rookie year to the fact that the Giants just went backwards all the way around him. Offensive line got worse. Eli Manning retired. Danny Dimes and Tommy Cutlets. Yeah, I'll give him a new reevaluation stage here behind the Eagles' offensive line and Jalen Hurts as his quarterback. Do want to get back to the defensive line. I should ask you this before when you're talking about it, mentioning Hassan Reddick, that Brandon Graham in his prime was probably a more valuable player because he did more than just rush the quarterback, that he set the edge. He was stout against the run. That's not Hassan's strong suit. They paid $17 million for Bryce Huff. And his 4 years in the league, granted undrafted, had to work his way into the Jet lineup. Last year played more, but again, less than 50%, basically in on passing downs. Is $17 million the going rate for a guy just to rush the quarterback? Because that's all I know that Bryce Huff can do at this time. Are the Eagles betting on Bryce Huff on the come without knowing whether he can be the type of defensive end that you described when you talked about Brandon Graham?
Well, I mean, it's I'm glad you qualified it the way you did. We don't know he can rush the passer. We know he rushed the passer 1 year. That, of all the things they've done this offseason, good and, sort of like cutting fat guys, the most remarkable thing is they bet $17 million that Bryce Huff isn't an undrafted free agent flash in the pan. I was astonished that they went that hard after that guy and with that kind of bullishness. Now, you can argue that, 2 years ago, we were kind of saying the same thing about Hassan Reddick, right? Nobody was really sure. And that's why there wasn't a huge market for Hassan Reddick. He's been vastly underpaid for 2 years, considering what he's done and what he did. So Howie was right about that. But Howie's been wrong about a lot of defensive ends. He's been very bullish on guys like Vinny Curry. He drafted Marcus Smith. He's done a lot. He thinks he's like a defensive end whiz, and he's going to outfox the market, and sometimes he does, but mostly he doesn't. So, to answer your question, I would not have spent $17 million on Bryce Huff, and I'm not sure that they weren't bidding against themselves to some degree.
Boy, I don't know, Marcus. There were a lot of teams interested in Bryce Huff, but I would argue, isn't that what free agency is about? He's a projection, no question about it. He's not a proven player, but he's coming off his rookie deal. You think there's room for improvement. I was, maybe the greatest free agent signing in recent Eagles history is Brandon Brooks. Nobody thought Brandon was going to turn into the best right guard in football when he arrived from Houston. He was a good player, but wasn't great. And all of a sudden, here he comes, gets with Jeff Stoutland. The rest is history until the injuries crop up. Malcolm Jenkins, who was the safety? I always forget the safety Eagles fans wanted that year. You guys remember?
It's the guy that went to New Orleans.
Yeah. Yes. Jerry Spurd, right?
Yeah, Jerry Spurd. I think he got hurt, right? Bird got hurt.
He got hurt. He was a good player, but everybody was criticizing the Malcolm signing. Oh, they got just a guy. He played corner. He came out as a corner.
Yeah.
And we all know Malcolm's one of the great players in Eagles history, great defensive players. Isn't that what free agency is about? Like evaluating and trying to find that untapped potential?
Absolutely. But Malcolm had way more.
He did.
Malcolm had way more pedigree, and so did Brandon Brooks. Had way more pedigree than Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff has 10 sacks in 1 year, and he's been in the league for 4. Yeah. So I think he had 7.5 in the first 3. So I mean, look, God bless Howie Roseman and Bryce Huff. I don't wish any ill on either one of them. I just thought it was I would say it's a bigger gamble than Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, same here. I said the same thing, and I watch a lot of Jet games as a Jet guy, and he's got a good get off, but I watched them run right behind him when he's going wide outside. I don't know if you heard me say this. It's really ticked off Eagle fans. I compared him to Jason Babin.
I was just going to say that.
Jason Babin. Yep. Great at rushing the pass, and people forget how good, because it went so badly in his second year they had to release him, and people forget he had 18 sacks his first year. Yeah. He made second team All Pro. He was phenomenal his first year, and then like a house of cards, it all came down.
Now Marcus was there for Jason Babin. I've heard. I wasn't there. I've heard he's a bit of a dick, to be kind. That now Bryce Huff I've only met once. He seems like a really, really good dude. So I think that part of it's going to change. Jason Babin's the only guy in the world who doesn't like Jason Kelce, as far as I know.
Well,
so that might have been part of the problem.
I will say this: like Kelce has very little use for, and this was a young Jason Babin. He's probably a very different person right now, but he was kind of a blowhard. And the remarkable thing about him, and I hope this isn't inappropriate, is
nothing's inappropriate here.
I do. He spent almost all his time. He was very well built, and he spent almost all his time in the locker room without his shirt on. You just don't do that. Dudes just don't do that, and he did it every day. And he had these, some and this was what 15 years ago, 10 years ago. He had a remarkable array of tattoos, and he was just a kind of a showy guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. Football players generally don't hang out with their shirts on, and Jason Babin was addicted to it.
And I'm not trying to make any aspersions about Mr. Huff and his personality and his locker room behavior. I'm just comping the potential on-field comparison that they're both really good speed pass rushers from the outside. Lend a hand with the run. Yeah, we don't know if they have any chance to achieve it.
Jason Babin got targeted, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Hassan Reddick gets targeted. Josh Sweat gets targeted like all the time. And until their defensive tackles wore out, they were running around the outside. And then when Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter kind of gave out gas, they said, we don't have to do that anymore. We'll just go up the middle.
I don't want to overly state the way guys do their business. I think what your role in the locker room is important, not as important as it is on the field. But I'd forgotten how entertaining CJGJ could be. 1 year out of the mix, and you forgot how entertaining he was when he returned to talk to you guys the other day. Here's what I came away with, and this is just my own personal evaluation. If it's wrong, I apologize. If it's unfair, I apologize. I think the guy's just a goof. I don't think he's a diva. I don't think he's a bad dude. I don't think he's an ego-driven guy. Well, maybe a little ego-driven. He put himself on.
There's some ego. There's some ego.
I just think he's a goof. I think he's kind of detached from the way most 20-something-year-olds look at life, handle their life, and the like. They have a new defensive coordinator, some changes on the defensive staff. Are they going to, the new Eagles defensive staff, going to be able to focus CJGJ to keep him on the straight and narrow and the guy who was the great playmaker 2 years ago when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl?
I'll say this. I'm going to be fascinated to see the CJ Gardner-Johnson / Vic Fangio dynamic, because Vic Fangio doesn't deal with goofs. And no, he wasn't a goof. You know, he all right,
then do me a favor. Give me the Marcus. I gave you my Dr. Phil evaluation. Give me the Marcus Hayes, CJGJ personality, fitting in with his teammates, working with coaches evaluation.
I used to term brash, Marcus. I think he's brash, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, especially when you're on the field.
They had to have a meeting with CJGJ before he entered the locker room last time. And apparently there were conversations about his attitude and his professionalism before he entered the locker room this time. So that's not me saying this is what I saw. This is me saying this is what they did. That's not a goof. CJGJ was at the Super Bowl, was walking around with a selfie stick, recording himself during the media availabilities, and from what I heard, pretty much all the time. So again, to each his own. He can play. He can play football when he's healthy. He's a really good player. But to diminish the personality issues is, I think, certainly unwise. And let's be honest, he gave a 12-minute press conference. 6 minutes of it was about him not being a distraction anymore, growing up, maturing. So if he's addressing his own, sort of self-evaluation and maturity, whether he was talking about, the negotiations last year, being in a locker room, all this sort of self-awareness he has now, he had a lot to be self-aware about. So no, he wasn't a goof. And yeah, he was brash, but he was brash and dismissive. He was brash and sort of egocentric. So again, like I said,
yeah.
I hope it's a different CJGJ. I think it needs to be for him to get the most out of himself and for the Eagles to get the most out of him.
And it's always a cost benefit. I think the Eagles saw the playmaking ability when he was healthy, as you mentioned, and they saw the defense without that playmaking ability, said, let's give this another shot. You brought up Vic Fangio, And I think you're right. You know, Vic's known as a very old school discipline. You got to play your role, sort of almost the Patriots way, do your job type of thing. Don't be freelancing. Now you have CJ. You also have Devin White, tremendously talented linebacker from a physical standpoint. And we know this team doesn't get linebackers. You talk about pedigree. This was the 5th overall pick in the draft, Marcus. I've talked to multiple people from Tampa who watched him play for 5 years. Every single one of them. He's a great athlete, but, and then comes the snowball down the hill of defenses. He overruns. He does. This, to me, with Vic Fangio, looks like a budding disaster. Is this just panic? We need something with some ability at linebacker.
Yeah, I believe they think they have a window in which they can win, right? So if you draft a linebacker in the 2nd round, say, he's going to make so many mistakes that you're probably not going to be able to win with him, especially if he's playing next to Nakobe Dean, who has all of 5 starts in his career. So Nakobe's going to be making real-time mistakes. There's a difference between making a mistake and trying to make a play. Devin White doesn't make mistakes. He tries to make plays, which isn't always the best strategy. But when the Bucs defense was really, really good, they could cover for that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the market tells you what a guy is. And I'm a little bit less concerned with his freelancing than I am with his diminished physical abilities. I'm not sure that there's a lot of tread left on that tire. So between the two, I don't have a problem with the signing. It's not was it $7 million?
No, it's $4 million, really.
$4 million. So I don't have a huge problem with the signing and the outlay, but I think the market tells you what to expect from him, and that's fine. I mean, he's had a good career so far. There's only so many plays you can make, and it is remarkable. I will say this about CJGJ. He isn't nearly as reckless as he is accused of being. You know what I'm saying? He's reckless for a safety, but he's not nearly as reckless as he's accused of being. And, you know, dirty little secret, Brian Dawkins was extremely reckless.
Yeah. Well, guys who make plays you got
to take chances to make plays.
Right.
Exactly.
So if you're on a defense and you're making plays and you're reckless, you get away with it. And God bless him, but Brian Dawkins went off script a lot. Troy Polamalu made a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I don't, CJGJ, and again to kind of your point earlier, Jody, CJGJ has a profile where if he doesn't do everything by the book, it's magnified. And, you know, a lot of guys. I can't remember. I was trying to remember who I was talking to last year during an Eagle who played with a great player, like one of the Watt brothers and one of the Bosa brothers. And he said, well, I played behind this guy. This is going to be easy playing behind these guys because they don't nearly go off script nearly as much. I think it happens a ton defensively, and we just don't see it. And we are so enamored of big plays by good guys that we don't give it as much attention as it probably otherwise would get.
Marcus, I'm going to give you a read that I have, a concern I have about the Eagles and the moves they made this offseason, specifically on one side of the ball, specifically on one aspect of playing defense. The Eagles' additions on defense this year all seem to be better going forward, going downhill. That Huff is a guy who we know can get after the quarterback, and CJGJ, 6 interceptions, going to be a playmaker, going to come up with INTs here, better against the pass. Devin White, the strength to his game is going forward and potentially getting sacks. Even a guy like Zach Bond, who they say is a tweener, plays both linebacker and edge. He didn't really play until he got to the edge, and they said, get downfield. Trust the quarterback there, big guy, and he did a pretty good job of it. All of the Eagle additions are better at the quarterback, getting to the QB, running down quarterbacks. I'm going to use a Johnny Mackism here. Nobody cares about stopping the run until they have to stop the run. Then it becomes a problem. Is stopping the run going to be a problem for the Eagles again this year?
As I've said since the overtime game they won against Buffalo, everything depends on how Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter play.
Yeah.
You draft them, you move up to draft each of them, and not necessarily just stop the run, but to be foundational franchise players for 10 to 15 years. They drafted 2 Fletcher Coxes. And maybe you get one out of the 2 to be Fletcher Cox. But you can't draft those guys that high and then have to support them. Now, Milton Williams has a hand in this as well. He's a 3rd-round pick entering his 3rd or 4th year. He has to play better as well. But those 2 guys are kind of the be-all and end-all. They're the first down defensive tackles who have to make it 2nd and long or 2nd and mid-long. So you're right, Jody. Everything they did is to facilitate pressuring the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But none of it matters if the middle is soft.
At Inkstained Wretch, one of my favorite Twitter handles ever. X handles, tremendous. Marcus Hayes, Inquirer.com. You wrote about the foundation, right, of Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis.
I actually had to get permission, right? So my boss is we're talking about what the topic is going to be. Excuse me, on one of these days, and like Mike Sealski and Dave Murphy are other columnists.
Yeah.
And Dave the Phillies, and Mike was covering college basketball. So, one of the things I pride myself on is versatility. I was like, what do you want me to write about? It seems like Eagles talk is still, whatever. And he was like, yeah, I'd love you to write about the defense. I was like, well, my observation on the defense is none of this stuff matters unless the defensive tackles play to their pedigree. But I've written that a lot. And he's like, you have written it a lot, but go ahead and write it again. And it did fine. But
by the way, I agree with you. I've said to Jody, the foundation of this defense has to be built on Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. Has to be.
I would say this. The foundation of the Eagles for the last 12 years was built around Fletcher Cox.
Yeah.
Period.
Yes.
Jason Kelsey's been great. Lane Johnson's been great. You've had good quarterback play. Their most consistent player around who they built all of their defenses was Fletcher Cox. He's been the constant.
Well, Marcus,
a pretty good leader.
Marcus, I haven't talked to you since Fletcher's retirement. I made the argument that you put the Mummers outfit on Fletcher Cox, you give him the podcast, you give him the personality. People recognize he's the better Eagle. Jason Kelsey's phenomenal. Jason Kelsey, I'm not criticizing Jason Kelsey. He's a Hall of Fame player. For some reason, Fletcher Cox is not thought of the way he should be. This is one of the great players in franchise history. Agree with me or disagree with me?
I more than agree with you. The best player in the last 12 years in Philadelphia, the best athlete was Claude Giroux. And it wasn't close. He was just the best. I mean, it's a long time, but it was Claude Giroux. The second best player and the second most valuable player is Fletcher Cox. And again, I don't think it's particularly close. And it's a long time. It's 10, 12 years. But he showed up all the time. He was elite for 6 or 7 of those years. And he was the player around whom 2 Super Bowl defenses were built. They went twice with Fletcher Cox.
Yeah. He was the best player on the only Super Bowl team. The best player on the only Super Bowl team in Eagles history.
And it's not close, and it's not debatable. He was.
Hold on a second there. So are you going to call the Hall of Fame selection writers, the 50 guys who were tasked with putting guys into the Hall of Fame, the highest honor that you can possibly get in the National Football League? When they put Jason Kelsey in and don't put Fletcher Cox in, will they be idiots because they've left out the best player in the Eagles over the last decade, according to Marcus Hayes, and it isn't even debatable?
Well, I would say that Fletcher Cox at his peak was more valuable than Jason Kelce. And Jason Kelce has probably been elite longer than Fletcher Cox, but I would say it's probably easier to be elite at a position where you don't have somebody over your head every time, as opposed to being elite.
Whoa. What do you mean don't have somebody over your head every time? He's playing center. Of course there's somebody over his head every play.
You need to watch him center play.
By the way, Jason Kelce would agree with Marcus and I.
Right.
Jason Kelce would be the first one to tell you. I mean, and he's not being self-deprecating. Jason said there's two players I played with that would have been successful regardless of coaching scheme, and that was Jason Peters and Fletcher Cox. That's
right.
it. Everybody else
argue that Jason Peters is the second best Eagle in that time span. I mean, Jason Kelce is a really good player. Yeah. Lane Johnson's better than him. Jason Peters better than him. Fletcher Cox is better than him.
Yeah, I'm just.
And Jason Peters, a lot of people, he's hurt himself by hanging on for so long, but he was. I mean, Jason Kelce retired. They still talk with Reverend Marcus knows every single one of those offensive linemen that played with Jason Peters talk about him like he's some mythical figure.
Jason Peters
with such reverence.
Jason Peters used to do his warm-ups and drills with the linebackers. I mean, he was just an absolute freak, freak. And for a 5-year period, Fletcher Cox was one of the 3 best defensive tackles in football in an era of spectacular defensive tackles. I mean, he's just so good. And the last 3 years, he hasn't been nearly as good, but he's been very good.
And he's still been very good. And Jody agrees.
I said he was the most consistent Philadelphia Eagle defender this year. Consistent. He might not have been the best, but you're talking about down in, down out, game in, game out. He's still their most consistent player, and man, are they going to miss him?
Who's that, Fletcher?
Yeah, Fletcher.
Fletcher was not good after he hurt himself against Buffalo. He hurt that groin, and he was the last 7 games after Buffalo. Yeah, he was
but remember what we're talking about. The Eagle defense that fell apart. I'll tell you, he fell apart less than a whole bunch of other players on that Eagle defense. I'll still call him the most consistent. All right, want to wrap on this note, and this is for both of you, Marcus, you first. Was there a Kellen Moore sighting at the NovaCare complex when you were down there for any of your get to know the newest Eagle press gatherings? Do we know that he exists? Are we positive that he's actually breathing and upright these days? Because the Eagles haven't seen fit to make him available to any of the media outlets.
They make available either. That's just the way the Eagles do. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with it.
I will say I was embedded with the Cowboys twice in like a 3-year period. Embedded, like I spent the week with them before the Eagles played them. One of them was the Doug Peterson guaranteed win week. That was fun. And so they have their coordinator availability like every team does, but their coordinator availability at that point was just, you got the 2 guys in the hallway, which is funny because the Star where they practice is about the size of like the Merck drug plant. It's just massive, right? There's a helipad between the 2 buildings, between the regular building and the players building. And Jerry, it's so big, Jerry can land his chopper on the ground, on the turf between the 2 buildings. So they're having these press availabilities for the coordinators in the hallway for someone, which is very intimate. And you could like jump between the 2 and do whatever you needed to. Kellen Moore does not impress you in a press conference. So maybe that's one of the reasons we haven't had the, Kellen Moore introductory press conference.
Really? Okay.
And who's really good at press conferences? I always enjoyed him. Was Brian Johnson.
Yeah, Brian was great. Yeah, very
well
thoughtful,
spoken.
Tried to answer questions as best, and that hurt him sometimes. I love Brian Johnson. I think he's still going to be a future head coach in this league.
Yeah, Kellen is not the guy, especially with so many things up in the air and so many sort of moving parts. And you've got a locker room issue that you've got a locker room concern that he's not aware of or familiar with because he hasn't been in it. You've got AJ Brown saying, you know, it's a business, but I want to stay. You've got all these things up in the air that he's going to be asked about. Questions he literally can't answer. You know.
By the way, AJ, I wanted to talk to two WIP guys. All right, I'll throw you. We've kept you too long. Do you got to go, Marcus? I want to sneak in an AJ. AJ, it's not your fault, obviously, it's WIP guys, but it seems like an almost backwards type of thing in that they did a flippant poll, I think it was at one time. Should the Eagles trade AJ Brown? Nothing more than that. But then it takes on a life of its own. Kay Adams puts it on her show. Should the Eagles trade AJ Brown? And AJ's there like, what are you talking about? But I don't want to get traded. I don't want to get traded. Now it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Post June 1st, if you trade AJ Brown, you gain a little bit of salary cap space. Devontae Smith is going to get an extension soon. He's going to smartly wait for Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb to set the market. You know, rising tides raise all boats type of thing. He's going to get a heck of a lot of money. Is there some legs to this now? New England is a team that was looking to overpay Calvin Ridley. If they go quarterback in the first round, bang. You know, I had heard from a little birdie that they had called Howie Roseman about AJ Brown. Could this develop into something post June 1st? They can't trade him before June 1st, but he's the type of player where teams will hold back budget money if they think they can get him. Any chance of that happening?
AJ Brown's been the best player on the team for 2 years.
I know. He's the best football player. Best football player they have.
Yes, and it's again not very close. So yeah, I can't imagine them considering trading AJ Brown. He's not a problem.
No,
he's
I
not
agree.
nearly as big a distraction as we perceive him to be. He's a distraction and called himself a distraction, but he's not a problem. And the thing about AJ is his heart's in the right place. You know, there are lots of diva wide receivers, and let's be honest, he's got 2 open signs on his locker. His social media handles is like one.
Always 1K, always open. Yeah.
He is not a shrinking violet, but his heart's in the right place. He works real hard. He wants everybody else to work hard, and he wants to win. But he's a young guy, and he's emotional, and he does things that can be perceived to be destructive. I don't think they're necessarily destructive. I don't think he's taken very seriously by most people in the locker room to that degree. You know what I'm saying? So no, I think that any consideration of trading AJ Brown is down the road when AJ Brown maybe wants a new deal and probably won't get it because he got $100 million for 5 years. That's one of those contracts I expect to play out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So no, I understand what you're saying. You run a poll like that, which I thought was kind of a silly poll. Like, who's going to say, yeah, trade AJ Brown?
They got him.
Yeah, a lot of people.
It wasn't 95-5. It was more like 60-40, Marcus.
Well,
WIP listeners. We know WIP poll takers. They'll mix it up.
Yeah, we also know what 40% of the people do with the election polls. All right. So it's just a foolish thing to consider. It's a foolish question. And the fact that it got a life of its own is AJ Brown's fault. All he had to do was say, no, I want to stay here on the initial podcast. Was it it was the initial podcast. Or was it the Kay Adams podcast?
Well, wherever on K before he jumped on WIP, he called it the WIP himself. Well, he was on with K first. K furthered the story.
Right. Yeah. All he has to say is, no, if they want to trade me, I don't want that to happen. I like being in Philadelphia. All right. But AJ's feelings got hurt by a radio station.
Yep. Yeah.
And he said it's a business, implying that maybe he wants out. So, and then he went on WIP and said, no, I don't want out. But he was doing damage control to damage that he did.
That's true. That is very true. And here's how I would lay it out. And it's apropos because I think it's the same exact thing as I've been saying for 2 days about Justin Fields. Do you have to worry about submitting his contract? Yeah, legit. Does AJ get a little emotional, overreact? Yeah, a little bit. Is AJ and Hurts's relationship at times, I think, actually counterproductive? Yeah. What trumps it all? He's the best football player on the team. You don't trade the best football player on the team. Does 2 extra years of cheap quarterback play for Kenny Pickett help? Yes. Will there be a less of a disruption, if there's any, and I don't think there's really going to be any, of him looking over Jalen Hurts' shoulder as compared to Justin? Yes. What's the most important thing? You need the best football player as your backup, just in case Jalen Hurts breaks his leg and is out for 6 weeks. And Justin Fields is the better football player. End of discussion. Same thing for me.
I'm actually disappointed with you guys because you didn't bring
up. Not the first time, Marcus.
You didn't bring up the whole looking over the shoulder thing, right?
Yeah, John and I did in the first segment. Sorry we didn't ask you about that. Yeah, give us your comment on that. Legit, what the hell are we talking about here? What do you think about the backup quarterback? Marcus Mariota came in. Everyone in the world knew he was a backup quarterback. He'd been a backup quarterback coming in. Is this an issue with the Eagles this year with Kenny Pickett?
Jalen Hurts, the only thing I like that Jalen Hurts says is that the rent is due every day. I really believe that he believes that he has to play well every snap in practice in order to justify keeping his job. I think that's a great attitude. Like every athlete should subscribe to that. And it's one of the things I think he really subscribes to. So I don't think Jalen Hurts ever looks over his shoulder. If any quarterback, any player is distracted by the presence of another player that they think they might lose their job to at some point, you need to trade that player. You are a bad teammate. You are a non-competitor. You are Carson Wentz.
You could be Kenny Pickett because he didn't want to compete in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Right. That I do not like that. I do not think Jalen Hurts lives that way. I think he lives. No. I think he looks over his shoulder every second. Like he's like, look, I got to keep going. I got to keep going, getting forward. The next guy is going to be great. That's his motivation. That's great. But if it's fear and if it detracts from you, if it affects your performance negatively, as it did Carson's, you need to get rid of that guy. And I don't care what position it's at. I don't care what sport it is. I don't care if it's, team poker, get rid of the person who's afraid they're going to lose.
Yeah. Brashness, as I called CJ Gardner-Johnson, is not necessarily a bad thing in professional sports. You should be brash. You should want to compete. You should think you're better, especially if you're a star player. And I agree with you, Chandler. By the way, why would anybody think anybody's looking over their shoulder? Maybe Carson Wentz. Kenny Pickett and Justin Fields haven't played well. Nobody's looking over their shoulder at those two guys.
I got to tell you, when the conversation about Carson Wentz being upset that they drafted Jalen Hurts, who was not a very good quarterback, like not a very good professional prospect quarterback, plug and play guy,
marginal,
that he was worried about Jalen Hurts being drafted in the second round in the same draft where Aaron Rodgers had Jordan Love drafted in the first round, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I mean, it was beyond I could not believe it. Utter disbelief. I totally dismissed that Carson Wentz would be worried about Jalen Hurts. And then he was.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what in the world is going on here? You're Carson Wentz. You just signed a $128 million contract. You just went to the Pro Bowl. You did this, you did that. They've totally mortgaged their future to accommodate you. Jalen Hurts is, was it Taysom Hill? When he was drafted.
Yeah, they were talking about two quarterbacks on the field at the same time. All the wacky spring stuff. Oh, maybe we can get them on the field at the same time. Yeah, it was crazy.
It just blew my mind. And, that's probably of all the many wrong things I've been wrong about, that's the wrongest I've ever been, that Carson Wentz was worried about Jalen Hurts. And I was not like a huge Carson Wentz guy. Like, I didn't think Carson Wentz was like this great leader, great character, whatever, but it just did not enter the realm of my possibilities that he would be worried about Jalen Hurts, who was a project quarterback,
Yeah. All right, let's get out on this note because Marcus, McMullen, and McDonald all agree. Don't sweat Jalen Hurts being nervous. That's not Jalen's bag. He doesn't do that. That's not going to be an issue. Marcus, great stuff. Always a pleasure when you come on. You're right. You got a good tan. Last time we asked him out, he told me, no, I'm going to Florida. He needs a good tan. Thank you very
much. I'm going back tomorrow.
Nice. Finish it up.
As you talk to two very.
You're not.
No, I'm not. Right. No, we're not. And we're going to be as Caucasian as we are right now when you come back. And
it was nice. It was nice for a couple of days. Now it's winter again.
I think you're
leaving at a perfect time.
Show off how pale you are.
Yeah. Mark, it's always a pleasure. Thanks, bud. We'll get you up again.
Thanks, Marcus.
All right, guys.
Probably before the draft. We'll get Marcus Hayes back up with us here on Birds 365.
Wind him up and let him go. All right.
Marcus is always full of opinions. That's why we love him. All right. For all you out there looking to save a little money on your car insurance, have I got an option for you? Birds fans, here's your chance to save up to 40% on the all-important car insurance right now. For one of JAKIB Sports' great partners, here's what you need to do. Call one of their two managing general partners, either Jim or Fran, and tell them you're a friend of JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services. The first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Appreciate Marcus Hayes jumping in with us here on Birds 365. Got another good guest, another JM coming your way in less than 10 minutes from now. Johnny Marks, talk show host, host of his own YouTube show, and a good follow on Twitter at John Marks Media. Going to jump in with us coming up in, as I said, less than 10 minutes from now. John, a name we haven't mentioned here on Birds 365 in a couple of weeks, and shame on me for that. And it just dawned on me last night. I said, we never talk about this guy. And there's a reason that we don't. Isaiah Rodgers. I've not brought him up. You haven't brought him up. None of our guests have brought him up. As of right now, you can make an argument that he is going to be a starting player for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. If everything falls correctly, that he is best served to be their best slot corner. And man, was that a mess last year. And they've been waiting patiently for him to get reinstated. He was allowed to reapply to the National Football League after the Super Bowl. I thought it was the start of the league year. And I saw this morning, I researched it, I Googled it, and I said, no, he was eligible to reapply for reinstatement in the NFL after the Super Bowl. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, well, I'm sure he reapplied. As far as when Roger Goodell gets to it, my sense will be before on-field work starts if he's going to unsuspend him and everything.
All right, but let me take a time out there, and I'm trying not to blow this into a conspiracy. Isn't he kind of obliged to make that decision if you're right? And I don't know it, and I doubt you know it. You're assuming that he reapplied. I don't really know that he did. Shouldn't the NFL react to that like right away? Aren't they handicapping the Eagles if they don't give a decision right away? If the free agency kicks in, Eagles start spending money, start making decisions. We'll get back to you whenever we want.
I don't think the Eagles are in the dark. I think we're in the dark. I think they communicate with the Eagles, but it's not something when they suspend players for long periods of time. It's not something they put on their transaction wire that so-and-so applied for reinstatement. Maybe they should, but they don't. And partially because they don't want to handle it right away, I assume. I always say it's a very reactive, not a proactive league. So just because we don't have the information doesn't mean the Eagles don't have the information.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate again. If the NFL has leaked, whispered, however you want to describe it, to the Eagles what his status is, and they know but we don't know, why are they holding back? If they've already told the Eagles when they believe they're going to reinstate the player, whether they're going to reinstate him or not reinstate him, why don't you just come out and say something rather than just leave all fans of that team in the dark?
Well, that's it. That's something.
Because they can? Is it back to the NFL is the big bad bully and they can do whatever the hell they want? Because there's nothing that the fans can point their finger and carry their pitchforks and they're never going away anyway? Is this another case of it?
Well, I don't think it's that high profile of a situation to go that far. I just think it's something that's the Eagles kind of know he's good. Look, the Eagles signed him a year in advance, essentially, because they know he's going to get reinstated if he doesn't get in trouble.
Right, if he doesn't do anything.
That part of it is so they kind of know it, and that's why they made the gamble. I talked about him a couple times. The interesting part is, to me, like, he's a slot corner from a trait standpoint, from a size standpoint, but he didn't play slot corner. So I've mentioned that a couple times in Indianapolis when he did played mainly outside. And I saw a couple reports. Well, he played outside. He can't play in the slot. I'm like, come on, guys. I'm like, He played outside because Indianapolis had Kenny Moore as one of the best slot corners in football. That's why he played outside, because there wasn't a spot for him. Here, when he is reinstated, if he is reinstated, he would project inside unless the Eagles do something else. The Eagles already have. Not only do they have Slay, and we'll see what happens with Bradbury post June 1st, which I think will depend on the draft. They also have Ricks and Ringo, who are 6'2" outside corners, even though Ricks played inside because Sean Desai is kind of a hinky about that. I mean, this guy's, if he's reinstated, if he's parted, and this is all if, there's no guarantee he's got anything left. The assumption, even though people come back after a year and they say, well, he'll be fine. Will he? I don't. Deshaun Watson looked pretty damn good before he had to not play, and he hasn't looked the same since. And he's young. The assumption that it's going to be seamless is kind of, you can't, what I'm trying to say is you can't count on Isaiah Rodgers to be your starting slot corner if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. And if you're doing that, you're probably making a mistake.
All right, but my response to that would be, and the slot corner they've signed so far in free agency after having cut the starting slot corner would be?
It ain't over. And I would argue
who's the good slot corner left of the free agent market, Johnny Mack?
I don't even think Kenny Moore signed. Has he?
Kenny Moore re-signed with the Colts.
Did he?
Yeah.
Avante's still out there? And the draft. I mean, I think the Eagles.
The draft is another thing. I'm talking about just free agency. They have not signed a slot corner and nor come close.
It's pretty clear that the cornerback market was not great in free agency. Number one, it wasn't a great cornerback compared to safety. So it seems like, and compared to a lot of positions, it seems like the Eagles went into free agency and said, well, we're probably going to have to get better at corner in the draft. That's how I kind of look at the way they've handled things. It all comes together. It's not about just free agency and just the draft. I will say how he likes to draft proof his roster and make sure there's a body at every position, so he doesn't feel compelled to reach for one. But they already have that in Isaiah Rodgers. That's what he is. He's the draft proof.
Right, but you just told me you can't count on him. He needs to be like icing on the cake because you don't know if he can actually play in the slot. He hasn't done much of it. He hasn't played in a year. You don't know if he's going to be able to just come back and play at the level. All those concerns you threw out there are legit, John. So you can't count on him as the guy.
But counting on someone is not draft proof. Like Devin White's draft. The Eagles could still draft a linebacker in the second round. I mean, they're not compelled to not draft a linebacker because they signed Burks and White. I mean, that's just draft proofing the roster. That's what I'm saying.
And oh, by the way, we still don't know that he's going to be reinstated. The NFL may know, the Eagles may know. We as Eagle fans don't know diddly squat. Here's what I know. Johnny Marks is going to join us next. Always fun to get JM on the show, make it a triple JM attack. John Marks next there on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Mac guys here with you on Birds 365. We got another JM to join the fray. One of my favorite media members. You can follow him on Twitter at John Marks Media on Twitter, and that will get you to his YouTube show where he's still sharing his insights with all the Delaware Valley. We're going to corner his insights for the next 25, 30 minutes here with us. John Marks here with us on Birds 365, who's looking good with the backwards hat. I'm thinking about doing that tomorrow, John. What do you think? Well,
Go for it.
Look as good as Johnny Marks with a back. Yeah,
I'm too old for that. I can't be cool like Sean.
Yeah, neither can I. But Marks is pulling it off. Gotta give him. Give him credit for it.
The old guy skateboarding in The Simpsons.
Johnny Marks saw some of your YouTube stuff. Kenny Pickett, now a Philadelphia Eagle. It because it happened at the same time Fields got relief. I guess it's a decent story, but he's Kenny Pickett. He's had 2 years in the league. Yeah, the Steelers have won more games than they've lost when he's played, but I've watched him play. Kenny Pickett does nothing special. Is it just the fact that it's a quarterback that some people have overreacted to this? And I might be guilty of charge. Why do you think Kenny Pickett is getting as much attention and play as he is as the backup for a guy we hope never sees the field here in Philadelphia?
Well, I mean, I think one of the reasons is that we've seen the backup see the field quite a bit with Jalen Hurts. Now, not a crazy amount, but every year Jalen seems to be banged up at least a little bit, and you have to see the backup in there. So I think there's that. And then when you put him next to the shiny object that's Justin Fields, now a lot of people are going to compare him and say, well, why would you want Kenny Pickett? Why would you not want Justin Fields? The reality is that you're hoping somebody can come in and can run your offense if the starting quarterback is out. And Kenny Pickett has shown me no reason to believe he's a starting quarterback in this league. But how he liked them coming out of Pitt. If you remember, I forget what game it was, but I think it was
North Carolina.
Yeah, Howie's up there with the binoculars.
Overtimes, yeah. I asked Kenny about it because Howie doesn't go to a lot of college games for people that don't know. Now, it helped because it was the Thursday game, the weird conference, whatever the hell it was. I can't even keep the conferences straight with college.
No, that was a straight ACC game.
Was it? So anyway, it was a Thursday night game. So the midweek helped and the proximity helped, but he doesn't go. So it was noteworthy that he was interested in.
Because at that point, you still didn't know the organization. It seemed like they were given signs that maybe they weren't totally sold on Jalen Hurts. They were in on a lot of conversations with Russell Wilsons and the Deshaun Watsons, et cetera. So they probably liked him in the draft process. They weren't going to draft him. So if they liked him coming out of college and now he's been in the league for 2 years, they gave up a minimal amount to grab him. And I think here's the important thing. he's not going to cost a lot of money over the next 2 years.
No, that's
Cost,
very important.
control, probably one of the biggest factors that they look at. Mariota's making $8 million a year. He stinks. So to get a quality backup, you're having to pay almost a premium price these days. So he's under contract the next 2 years. I think Howie also looks at it and says, like, hey, maybe we could even trade him if he has to come in and play and he looks great. We get a draft pick for him. So I think he checks a lot of those boxes. I don't think Kenny Pickett's great. I think he can come in and he can win a game or two if need be. If Jalen Hurts misses 3 games, they can win a game or two from that. But he was not good in Pittsburgh. I think we all know that. But you also look at Pittsburgh and the offense that they run and the offensive coordinate that
Matt Canada. Let's blame Matt Canada. Yeah.
So let's see what he does in Philadelphia. Hopefully, we never have to see him play. But I think it was a safe trade to make, and now you have a young quarterback who can be your backup for the next 2 years.
Yeah, man. I think it checks all the boxes. I've said to Jody, I like the move, John. I think it makes a lot of sense. You bring up the cost-effective part of it, how he loves, get him in the quarterback factory. Maybe they can spin him off. Maybe he's got to play 4 games. He wins 3. Maybe he turns into A.J. Beasley. You get something for him moving forward down the line. People convince themselves into quarterbacks other than the small hands. And by the way, Austin Powers, the small hand, he never fumbles. He's fumbled 1 time. That's the one thing he doesn't do. He's lost 1 fumble over his 2 years. I think it makes sense. And that's how I look at typically when the Eagles do something. It makes sense to me, and that's why I give the organization credit. A couple times they've gone off the reservation, though, and moves haven't made sense to me, most notably Saquon Barkley. What were your thoughts when you saw the Eagles go out of their normal way of doing business and say, let's bring in the big time back?
Well, I think if I wasn't an Eagle fan and didn't live here, I may have a slightly different opinion on the move. Because it's what I said when the Giants franchised him last year was like, what are you franchising him for? You guys aren't going to win anything, right? You're giving a 1-year contract to a guy that's probably not going to be there next year, which he's not. John, I looked at it after it was all said and done, and I was surprised that they went top of the market to do it. Howie, he's always lurking, and if he feels like he's getting good value, that's when he gets involved. No, they targeted him from the beginning, and this was very mutual. And I think it also shows you that Saquon, he's mad at the Giants, right? Like, this is kind of a vindictive move to be like, I'm going to go play for the Eagles. You wouldn't pay me. They will pay me. So it has a lot of those angles to it as well. I just look at the money that Jacksonville gave Gabe Davis and the money that the Eagles gave Saquon Barkley. It's comparable. It's similar. Yeah. And I'll tell you, Saquon Barkley is going to have more of an impact on the Eagles than Gabe Davis will have on the Jags. So while wide receivers are getting overvalued these days in free agent dollars, running backs aren't. So I'll take Saquon Barkley over Gabe Davis.
All right. Then let me counter that, John, because the name I've continuously brought up, I don't know if you paid attention to Aaron Jones at the end of last season. I mean, he was the best running back in football, and he does it all. He's a better receiver than Saquon Barkley. Sorry. Look at his numbers over the years. Consistently better. He's single-handedly, let me finish, Jody.
Okay.
Destroyed the Dallas Cowboys in a playoff game, 3 touchdowns. He got cut because he's about to turn 30, which I get. He's a little bit older, but he's got less touches. He's coming off that. He got, I believe, $7 million. Why not do that? And more, 1 year, $8 million.
Here's you got to take the timing into consideration. Aaron Jones got released after the Eagles had come to an agreement with Saquon Barkley. They'd already made the commitment to Barkley. So Aaron Jones wasn't a legitimate option
timing,
at that point.
I'm
2020 hindsight is real easy after you sign a guy and the other guy takes available and comes and signs for less.
I could go, to me, because of the receiving aspect. That's the only reason I bring up Aaron Jones. Look at Derrick Henry's contract. Look at all the other big time backs. Except Josh Jacobs, who got way too much money.
And that's a 1 year contract as well. With Jacobs.
No, Jacob
no,
got a
or he got 4 years.
Yeah.
He got 4 years.
But if you look at the actual contract, I think it's one for 14. All these contracts are nonsense, right?
Yeah, you can get out of it.
Yeah, Barkley's a 2-year deal,
it's a
even though they're calling it a 3-year deal.
Right.
He'll be under contract for 2. They'll either redo it or cut him after 2.
Yeah.
But I mean, with Saquon, a couple of things here. And let's not be naive about this. This is a sizzle signing for the Eagles after how last year ended. This is like, you look at how I even felt like this going into free agency. Not that I'm out on the Eagles, but I was kind of like, you just had such a bad taste in your mouth to how the season ended last year. This is a sizzle signing, and you get yourself in trouble when you make signings like this, when you overvalue a position and a player based on, oh man, could you imagine this offense with Saquon Barkley, with AJ, with Devontae Smith? So I think there's a little bit of that. But also, it feels like, and this is how the Eagles should be acting, that the most important thing about this season is getting Jalen Hurts back to the Jalen Hurts we saw at the end of 2022 and the first half of 2023. Because the reality is, I don't care. We can talk about everything else that we want to, cornerbacks, slot corners, linebackers, wide receivers. If Jalen Hurts doesn't turn back into that player that we saw, the Eagles aren't winning anything, right? So how do you do that? Well, he's got to be protected, but he's also got to be better in the pocket. He's got to have better pocket awareness. You get a new offensive coordinator. Now you have a running back that you feel like at least you can lean on a little bit more. We'll see what happens. But, like to me, this is a sizzle signing that maybe Howie got a little bit carried away with.
All right, let me give you a sizzle signing, Johnny Mac. I like that phrase.
I like that too. And I like the description because I agree with that. I think they went out of character, and I think John's right. They went out of character because they were trying to get the bad taste out of everybody's mouth and get everybody.
Here's what I see as their sizzle signing. I got a pretty good crystal ball working here. Week 13, Eagles going out to Hollywood again this year, playing the Rams. Hassan Reddick, who was acquired for a 5th-round draft pick by LA, already has 12 sacks for the Rams with 4 weeks to play. And new Eagle defensive sizzle defensive edge player, Mr. Huff, has 6 sacks, half as many as Hassan Reddick, and is being run on liberally when the Eagles are having trouble stopping the run again because he's the second coming of Jason Babin in the wide 9. I would argue that he is more of the sizzle signing, $17.5 million, than Saquon Barkley at 12. Did the Eagles correctly roll the dice here on this young, has never been a full-time, I didn't forget there's no full-time players on the edge anymore, but at least a 50% of the time player for the Jets these past 2 years, giving him as much money as they did? Is that not more sizzle than Barkley?
Yeah, I mean, for the position, it's not, because that is a standard. The Eagles are projecting they're buying the potential they believe that they're going to get from Huff. They're not. He has 1 year. He has one really good year of sacks, and before that, it's like, all right, he showed potential, all the metrics, the analytics, he gets off the ball, pressure, and all that stuff. Reality is, he's got to get to the quarterback, and if he's not getting double-digit sacks, this isn't a good signing. So if he turns into a 7-sack guy or an 8-sack guy, and 3 or 4 of those sacks are against slow tackles that he took advantage of, and he had multiple sack games, this will not be a good signing. And honestly, Jody, you bring it up Hassan Reddick. Maybe it's just me. Hassan Reddick has been unbelievable as an Eagle, and I don't know what the contract demands are. I don't know exactly what he's asking for. The Eagles obviously don't want to sign him to what he's asking for. He probably wants to be valued at $25 to $30 million a year, which the Eagles aren't doing. That's fine. But man, you got to find a way to make this work, at least for this season. Give him a bump like the Chiefs did to Chris Jones. Give him something that says, hey, listen, we know you want a contract. We're not able to work that out. We're going to give you some extra money. Hassan Reddick being here, this is supposed to be a Super Bowl roster. This isn't a step back year or a neutral year. This is supposed to be where they're going for, they're winning the Super Bowl. I think it's a huge mistake if they don't keep Hassan Reddick.
Agreed.
How much do you think, and we heard Howie, and I break my own rule. I always say, John, that these executives, coaches aren't under oath in these press conferences, and we all take it. Well, Howie said out in Indianapolis, essentially, we got to get Nolan Smith more involved. Now, he might be trying to blow some smoke and try to prop up the player. might mean nothing, might mean everything. But at some point, if you have Hassan Reddick and he's making, let's say, $20 million a year, and Bryce Huff and he's making 17, and Josh Sweat is making 12, and you want to get the first round pick involved, Nolan Smith, and you still got BG. Yeah. At what point is it too much?
Well, I mean, Nolan, if they get rid of Hassan Reddick, Nolan Smith better be ready to come in.
Oh yeah,
and have quality snaps. And like you had said, Howie can prop him up a little bit. If after the first year they're saying, I don't know, we don't know about this guy year 2. So if they do move on from Hassan Reddick, let's talk about it. You have Huff, man. You're betting on him to be your best pass rusher by far. BG's got a high motor. He's going to play limited snaps. He's going to be fine. But really, you're not counting on him to be anything more than he was last year. At least I'm not, right? So Josh Sweat's got to bounce back, right? Like Nolan Smith's got to have more contributions to the defense. For a team that values the pass rush, it makes no sense to get rid of Hassan Reddick. I'd rather have an extra pass rusher where with Vic Fangio, maybe he can move Brandon inside and he can play some inside snaps, rushing the passer in passing situations. I mean, I don't think it's too much at all. I think Hassan Reddick needs to be here next year.
All right, Johnny Marks, I'm going to give you a phrase that I know you understand because you got your hat on backwards, and all you young guys get this. A guy who is trending in the wrong direction is Devin White. I got reamed by a caller the other day on WIP because I suggested that he's not a good linebacker and that his better days are by. He made a Pro Bowl. He's a former All-Pro player. Yeah, that was a while ago. You know who else was a former Pro Bowl player? Shaq Leonard. How'd Shaq look coming in for the Eagles the second half?
In perpetuity. Everybody's in stasis. Everybody. Once you're an All-Pro,
you're an All-Pro.
You're an All-Pro.
Yeah.
Trending the wrong way. Devin White. Is he going to be able to make plays for the Eagles at linebacker this year? Is this one of those where Howie's betting on change of scenery, going to recapture the former magic? Or was this just a shot in the dark?
It's when you go and you buy the lottery tickets, Jody. I don't know if you're a lottery.
Oh, I play lottery. I'm in tonight. Mega $700 million. Oh, I got my tickets already.
So you have the scratch offs and you have the $1 scratch offs. You have the $2 scratch offs.
Yeah, those I don't play.
and then you got the $20 scratch off. And the $20 scratch off, you can win
that's
more.
That's pricey, by the way.
Right? Oh yeah. So let's say 10. Devin White's a $5 scratch off as opposed to the $1 scratch off. So what they've done this offseason, and they've added they're throwing numbers at the linebacker position, right? Like, so they have a couple of guys that they brought in, and Devin White is their priciest lottery ticket. Albeit, I love when you see it's always code when you see a Schefter say up to $7.5 million.
Yeah.
That's code for BS. This guy's making about $3 or $4 million less than I'm saying. But he's going to make $4.5 million. And if he reaches his incentives, that's a great thing. It means he's played, he's been productive.
Fair.
But to your point, Jody, I thought Devin White was a better player than he actually was. I remember last August, he had talked about he wanted to be traded because he wanted to be extended. They weren't extending him. Well, they weren't extending him for a reason. He was a Super Bowl hero. You would think that they would want to reward him and extend him. But the more I read about him and the more I talk to some people that I know down in Tampa, he's wildly inconsistent. And that one stretch during the Super Bowl year was the best he played in his career. Outside of that,
one of the great anomalies in sports. Yeah. I talk about it with Chody all the time. He was phenomenal in a 3-game run. He looked like the 5th overall pick in the draft. For the rest of his 5 years, he looked like an undrafted free agent who was really athletic.
And now you have Fangio. So now you're saying, because God, like, Vic Fangio is the only defensive coordinator you could ever have when you listen to the Eagles. He's so great. He's got a defensive coordinator tree. They just fired one of his guys after halfway through last year. But like so now Fangio's got to do now. He's got to get him to where he wants him, right? And by the way, Fangio, the players didn't really like Fangio down in Miami last year. Everything that I'm reading about Fangio is there were guys that weren't necessarily happy with him. He left after a year. So they're betting big on the new defensive coordinator coming in here and reshaping this defense. And I think he'll be a better coach, obviously, than what they had last year. But, you still got to get consistent play out of him. So my fear with Devin White is you're going to get the game where you're like, wow, this guy's unbelievable. We haven't had talent in linebacker here in a while. And then 3 games after 2-3 games in a row after that, you're saying, what the hell is this guy doing? He's an idiot out there. So we'll see.
You're going to get the Nick Morrow 3-sack game. And then nothing. Yeah, and nothing. Out of position. You're right with Vic. We've gotten away from it because there's been such an influx of free agent moves, and the Eagles are doing something, seems like every day. But you're right, John. They propped up Vic Fangio like he's a savior, and he's a good coach. He's been coaching for a very long time, and he's put together some great defenses over the years. But if you don't have personnel, I called him. They're making him out to be like he's the Greek god of defense, and he's here, so we're going to be fine on defense. You think people are buying into that too much, and they're going to be disappointed because these expectations. This was a bad defense last year, and it wasn't all because of Sean Desai and Matt Patricia. They had bad personnel.
Yep. Yeah. No. And last year I remember. And okay, it's a Twitter poll and it's a sports radio Twitter poll, but fans hated Jonathan Gannon so much. Sean Desai, just by coming in here, was a better defensive coordinator than Jonathan Gannon.
I know.
Ask any Eagle fan. 80% Eagle fans are saying, "Oh, it's a huge upgrade."
It's got to be better. It's got to be better.
Yeah, but meanwhile, no one knew who Sean Desai was before he had a press conference and they hired him. So again, last year, fans weren't worried about the new offensive coordinator and the new defensive coordinator until they were worried about him, right? Yep. So let's see what Vic Fangio does. And actually, John, it reminded me of, remember how bad Billy Davis was as the defensive coordinator? Chip Kelly, totally overmatched, should never have been a defensive coordinator in the NFL. Jim Schwartz came in, and I'm not a huge Jim Schwartz fan, but you could tell right away the difference between a Billy Davis and a Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz knows what the hell he's doing. I think you're going to see the same type of thing with Fangio coming in as far as adjustments and things like that. But that doesn't mean that he's going to be able to make up for lack of personnel on defense, because no coach is going to do that.
All right, got to get you on the record. Basically, almost every guest we've had on, I've asked this question since last week when Saquon signed. Part of Saquon's value to legitimize spending $12 billion on a running back is to get him the ball via the air coming out of the backfield. That has not been a strong suit of either the Philadelphia Eagles or Jalen Hurts since those two, with Nick Sirianni as the head coach, teamed up here in Philadelphia. That just we can debate why, we can try and put reasons to it or whatever, but I don't think anybody can argue they have not been good at it. Has it been more because of Sirianni, his offense, his way of doing things? We got to get the ball to AJ and Devontae. Or is it more because Jalen either A, isn't good at it, or B, doesn't like doing it? Would you point the finger more at the offense, its direction, the play calling, or would you point it more at the quarterback that that's not his strength? And so therefore, I'm not going to throw the ball to the back out of the backfield.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to know more after this year because Kellen Moore is going to want to throw to the ball to the back, right? Like he realizes, and I thought this is what we were getting last year with Swift.
Yeah,
he's an excellent receiver. He's not necessarily an every down back, but he's an excellent receiver. So of course they're going to try to utilize him out of the backfield. John, maybe you remember this, but I remember something to the effect of Nick Sirianni or somebody talking about how they don't really practice the screen pass all that much. I don't even think they tried to make it a part of their
they practice bubble screens.
That doesn't count.
Maybe they need to practice it more. Jesus. But going back to Andy, and Donovan was very good at selling it. The offensive line was very good at executing it. And they had Brian Westbrook and other good backs to do it. But that was such a huge weapon in their passing game. And really, Andy liked to say it was a part of the running game as well, which made everybody mad. Yeah. But why wouldn't you want to utilize that as a part of your game, especially the amount that they were blitzing Jalen Hurts at the end of last year? And that's not going to go away. It worked. So they're going to be blitzing Jalen Hurts. It's the perfect play call to where now defenses are going to be like, whoa, they might run a screen here. You have Saquon Barkley. It's got to be.
And you had Jason Kelsey too. I mean, who maybe is the best screen center, certainly of the generation. But you're right, John. Doug Peterson used to have one practice early every summer where the Eagles would just work on landmarks in the screen game. It was the boringest practice. All football practices are boring, but they're just practicing getting to the right landmarks in the screen game. They don't do it as much. I think some of it has to do with a different quarterback and a quarterback that's a different style. They should utilize it more. I think that's fair. Cam Jurgens is very athletic himself as he takes over the center position. And this is a bad job by me, by the way, Jody. We have not mentioned Jack Driscoll signed with the Miami Dolphins. We're an Eagles show, so I probably should have mentioned that yesterday. And Suo Pettis signed with Tampa Bay a couple days ago. Depth on the offensive line is all of a sudden they signed Matt Hennessy, who's had some injury problems, and Jason Kelsey's not here, and Cam Jurgens is moving, and you're assuming Tyler Steen could be that. We're used to great offense, at least over the past decade, used to great offensive line play in Philadelphia. Do you just take that for granted? No problem. Everything's going to be fine because Jeff Stoutland's here.
Yes, that's why I didn't get to it today. That's not on you, John. That's on me. I didn't bring it up. So what? Throw somebody to Stout. He'll make him into a backup. That's and guilty as charged. Probably shouldn't do that. But yeah, that's why it's less of a conversation piece.
And that plays into the screen game. So at John Marks Media, discuss that. And if you want to break some missionality news, our buddy, feel free to do that.
Well, I mean, listen, I'm waiting like everybody else to see if he becomes the guy. I saw it. I guess it was yesterday with Driscoll. I was waiting to see how much the Dolphins gave him, if they gave him a little bit more, because it's nice to have a guy that's experienced on that line that can play multiple positions. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't make more of an attempt to sign him. Opeta, I didn't expect him to come back. You could tell that they were ready to move on from him. But if Tyler Steen right now is either your starter or a guy that's going to be at least has the, you feel like has the edge to be the starter. Well, they said very, very early after he played last year, they weren't interested in him being the starter. So you hope the offseason and the fact he enters the second year that he's better. It's a little bit concerning to me because if they have an injury or two, they could be in trouble.
They right now have to address depth on the offensive line. There aren't many guys who are potential starters, and I know that the Eagles probably not going to start a guy they're going to sign at this point. It's going to be purely a backup guy, but the herd is getting a little thin at the offensive line position on free agency. All right, Johnny Marks, how can people best get their hands on your YouTube show? No, they can do it through your Twitter handle and go on your Twitter first, but directly to your YouTube show. How do people best do that?
Yeah, just go to YouTube, subscribe. It's at John Marks Media, and I'm also live on Twitter and Instagram or whatever, and it's 9:00 on most nights during the week. And yeah, so I should have some other news hopefully to be sharing coming up here in the next couple of weeks about where you can find me as well. But
nice.
In the meantime, every night at 9, including tonight, at John Marks Media, and subscribe, comment, like, all that good stuff.
Did you think your Sixers going to blow that game last night? Had a 14-point lead, and all of a sudden it disappeared in the fourth quarter.
Got to get out of that play-in tournament.
They were great defensively in the third quarter last night, and then they just disappeared for like a 6-minute stretch. I said, they're going to blow another game. But
the question is, who thought that they weren't going to blow that game last night?
Me. I had faith. They're blocking shots. They're getting steals. They're playing great defense in the third quarter. Hey, hung on and won it. And Oubre is a guy they got to re-sign for next year. He's been great for him. And that's the kind of stuff you're going to get from John Marks on his YouTube show. Make sure you check him out. We'll get him back on before the draft, and maybe he'll have an announcement for us between now and then. Jay Marks, always a pleasure, buddy. Thanks for jumping in.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
John Marks, Media, John Marks Media. Follow him on Twitter at John, that's no H, Jon, Marks Media. And that'll get you to his YouTube show and everything else. All right, Johnny Mac coming back. We got just a couple minutes left. Why don't we put a bow on the show?
Let's do it.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today, and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on three. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services. The first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Mac guys, only got a couple minutes left here before we wrap this puppy up. And by the way, shame on me. I should have asked Zander, who will be filling in for me tomorrow. I'm not going to be here on the show tomorrow. I got WIP fill-in duties. I'm going to go and do the morning show with Joe DeCamera. So Joe D.
Don't do any polls tomorrow.
That will be completely out of my control. I can guarantee you that. I will have no say on it. They run a poll question every single day. They'll come up with it. I'll just react to it. I will have no editorial control over that. So I'm covering my backside here already. So Johnny Mac will be here tomorrow, and maybe Zander can tell me in the comments section if he knows.
I think we're still working on it. So
okay, so nobody is
tune in to find out.
Tune in to find good tease out of you, Johnny Mac. All right, here's the last question I have for you before we wrap this bad boy up. Who do you think the Eagles will miss more? And this is a smaller question: Suapeta or Jack Driscoll? Who do you think is a bigger loss? Neither one of us is a bone-crushing, oh, my God, the Eagles season has fallen because they didn't retain backup offensive linemen. Who do you think was better for the Eagles?
Well, coming off last season, Sua was better.
Yeah.
I would have said before last season, easily Driscoll. Sua played like 500. He played like 45% of the offensive snaps. And, you know, they had injuries. Remember, Landon Dickerson got hurt late. He missed the one game. He started that game. He started a bunch of games when Cam Jurgens got hurt. And they took him out once and tried to give Tyler Steen an opportunity, and he was a disaster against the Cowboys, and they went right back to Sua. So short term, I think Sua was better, but I still think Jack Driscoll's more valuable because he can play more positions.
But let me ask you a question. If he can play more position, why wasn't he in there rather than Sua?
Yeah, well, that's what last year Sua was clearly better, but he can't play tackle. Jack plays right tackle, left tackle.
And that's what I think they looked at him as, a tackle last year. If they really thought he was a guard, they would have put him in a guard if he was better than Sua.
Yeah, and he started, I think, 9 games at right guard the one season, Jack Driscoll. And, yeah, they decided Sua was a better option. So last year, Sua, they thought, was better at guard, certainly, if they needed, and Jack played a tackle, but they didn't need much. Lane left the Jets game. Bryce Hupp lit up Jack Driscoll. That's when Lane left after about 7-8 plays, and Bryce Hupp had a big day against the Eagles. against Jack Driscoll.
Maybe that's why Jack Driscoll signed with the Bucs yesterday. He said, "Oh, spit! I'm going to have to try and stop."
He signed with the Dolphins. Sua signed with the Bucs.
Right.
Jack signed with the Dolphins.
Thank you. Yeah, that might have forced him out of town because he got abused by him in that Jet game. He didn't want to have it happen in practice all year long. So I'll never get on the field in the NFL if I'm asked to stop this guy. All right, I'm out tomorrow, Johnny Mac. Stay tuned. Be here tomorrow. Find out who's filling in for me. I have faith that you will be here because I'm not going to be here. You going to be here tomorrow?
I'm going to be here.
So you'll get John McMullen and yet to be determined in 2 and 2.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.